The CNC machine was screaming like a banshee when I walked into the production floor at 6:15 a.m., 15 minutes earlier than usual, because Mondays in aerospace manufacturing don't care about your weekend recovery time. My radio crackled with 3 different crisis reports before I even grabbed my safety glasses. Hydraulic leak on line 3 came the first. Quality rejected on the Boeing batch, said the second. The third one made me smile grimly. New systems dashboard is down again. That last one wasn't even my department anymore, but somehow when technology failed, it always found its way back to me. Tom Bradford, 49 years old, and I've been keeping this place running for 18 years. I knew every bolt, every supplier quirk, every FAA regulation that kept Titan Aerospace components from becoming a liability nightmare. I wasn't just the senior manufacturing director, I was the guy who made sure 380 people had jobs and our aerospace clients got their precision components on time. Now here's the thing about aerospace manufacturing that most people don't understand. When you see those smooth production lines and everything flowing like clockwork, that's not automation working. That's 18 years of knowing that supplier A delivers on Tuesdays but calls in sick every other Friday. Or that machine 7 needs specific lubrication that costs 30% more but prevents $50,000 failures. It's understanding that AS9100 compliance isn't just paperwork. It's the difference between meeting Boeing's delivery deadline and explaining to 200 workers why their overtime got canceled. My Air Force maintenance background taught me that in aerospace, there's no such thing as good enough. When you're working on F-16 engines at 2 a.m. in a sandstorm, you learn that precision isn't negotiable. Every torque spec, every safety wire, every inspection signature could mean the difference between a pilot coming home or not. That mindset never left me when I transitioned to civilian aerospace manufacturing. I grabbed my coffee, black as hydraulic fluid and twice as necessary, and headed into my corner office overlooking the production floor. The kind of controlled chaos only someone like me could appreciate. If a supplier shipment was late, I could have alternate sourcing lined up in 20 minutes. If the FAA showed up unannounced, I had every compliance document they wanted before they finished their introductions. Nobody threw parades for that kind of work. It wasn't the flashy stuff that got mentioned in board meetings or LinkedIn posts. It was the foundation that kept everything else from collapsing. Let me tell you about my relationship with Richard Hartwell, the owner. Back in 2009, when Titan was struggling and almost went under during the recession, I was the one who renegotiated supplier terms to keep us afloat. While Richard was having panic attacks about cash flow, I was on the phone with Gerald Williams from Phoenix Steel Supply, working out payment schedules that saved both our companies. When the aerospace industry contracted and everyone was laying off, I figured out how to retool our equipment for commercial aviation parts, kept 340 jobs when our competitors were shuttering plants. Richard knew this. For years, he'd introduced me to clients as the guy who actually runs this place. He'd joke that I knew more about aerospace manufacturing than he'd ever forgotten. But something changed after his health scare last year. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was his family pushing him. But Richard started talking about legacy planning and bringing fresh perspectives to operations. Corporate speak for my son needs a job, and my nephew has an MBA. So when my email pinged at 7:43 with a document titled Operations Transition Framework Draft, I figured it was some intern's misfiled attachment until I opened it. No greeting, no context, just a 2-page outline with my name, the words knowledge transfer timeline, and a signature line waiting for me to sign away 18 years of my life. No sender listed, no follow-up contact, like the document had materialized from some corporate fever dream. The thing referenced systems I hadn't even authorized access to yet. Process flows that took me years to develop. Quality protocols I'd written after learning hard lessons about what happens when you cut corners in precision aerospace manufacturing. Boeing 737-800 wing bracket specifications that I'd negotiated directly with their quality engineers. ITAR compliance procedures that required security clearance most people in this building didn't even have. I flagged it, added a note, missing authorization chain, no sender verification, won't sign, and dropped it into my review folder. Then I went back to the real crisis, a hydraulic failure that had shut down our highest margin production line, and a quality issue that could cost us our Boeing contract if I didn't fix it fast. While I was knee-deep in damage control, dealing with the kind of problems that don't solve themselves with motivational posters and team-building exercises, something was brewing in the executive wing. See, Richard had been back from his medical leave for exactly 3 days, and he was already making moves. Not the kind of moves you make when you understand operations, but the kind you make when you've been reading too many business magazines about disrupting traditional industries. By noon, I'd sorted the hydraulic issue, reworked the Boeing batch to spec, and even managed to source replacement tooling for next week's production run. I live for this stuff. Give me a problem with moving parts and supplier relationships, and I'll solve it before lunch. The hydraulic leak turned out to be a worn seal on Line 3's main press. Nothing dramatic, but if we'd let it go another day, we'd be looking at $35,000 in repairs and 2 weeks of downtime. The Boeing quality issue was trickier. Some dimensional variance in our Precision 737-800 wing brackets that their incoming inspection caught took me 45 minutes to trace it back to a tool wear problem on our Haas CNC machine. But once I found it, the fix was straightforward. That's the invisible work that guys like me do. We don't just put out fires, we prevent the ones that would shut down the whole operation. We know that quality isn't about checking boxes on an audit form, it's about understanding why those boxes exist in the first place. Every procedure, every safety protocol, every supplier qualification, there's a story behind it, usually involving someone learning an expensive lesson. So, when my assistant knocked and said, "Tom, the owner's back from his sabbatical. He wants to sit in on the 2 p.m. operations review," I just nodded. Richard hadn't attended an operations review in 2 years. Usually sent his apologies and asked for the summary email, but after 8 months of wellness retreats and whatever else rich guys do when they have health scares, maybe he wanted to reconnect with the business. At 49, I was hitting my stride professionally. The mortgage was manageable, kids were doing well, and I figured I had another 15 good years to build something meaningful at Titan before retirement. Financial stability was finally within reach after years of military pay and early civilian struggles. The conference room smelled like whiteboard markers and nervous energy. Operations review, second Tuesday of every month at 2 p.m., usually meant budget updates, production metrics, and me explaining why we couldn't just automate everything like the younger crowd wanted. Everyone was settling in with their coffee when the door opened. Richard Hartwell walked in, looking like a man who'd spent 8 months discovering himself and didn't like what he found. Thinner, grayer, but his smile was too wide. Not relief to be back, more like anticipation. Behind him came 2 guys I'd heard about but never met. His son Casey, 26, looking like he'd stepped out of a business school recruiting poster. Expensive suit, confident stride, and that particular brand of arrogance that comes with an MBA and 0 real-world experience. Next to him was Jordan Hartwell, Richard's nephew, fresh out of Berkeley and already scrolling on his phone while walking. Strike 1 in my book. Richard clapped his hands once. "Team, I want to introduce Casey and Jordan. They've been studying our operations from a strategic perspective. Today we're going to discuss some exciting structural improvements." Now, here's what you need to understand about that phrase. Studying our operations from a strategic perspective. In aerospace manufacturing, you don't study operations from a distance. You study them by getting your hands dirty, understanding why machine 4 makes that clicking noise on cold mornings, or knowing which supplier actually tests their material certificates versus which ones just print pretty documents. But Casey stepped forward like he was about to pitch venture capital. "Thanks, Dad. Jordan and I have identified significant optimization opportunities in our current operational framework." He actually said that with a straight face. "We're implementing a digital transformation initiative that will streamline legacy processes and enhance our competitive positioning." I heard enough buzzwords to last me until retirement. Legacy processes. That's what 18 years of keeping this place profitable had become. Legacy processes. But then Casey said the words that made the room go quiet. As part of this transition, we'll be redistributing some operational responsibilities. Tom's been doing incredible work, but it's time to leverage younger talent who understand modern manufacturing technologies. The silence that followed was the kind you hear right before a machine fails catastrophically. Antonio Ramirez, our floor supervisor, actually choked on his coffee. Patricia from quality control was staring at Casey like he just announced we were switching to making bicycles instead of precision aerospace components. I didn't gasp or argue or ask questions. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out my badge, my building access card, and my equipment keys. Each one hit the conference table with a distinct metallic click. Then I stood up, nodded once to the room, and walked out. Behind me, someone whispered, "Wait, that's it? That was it. You want to replace the guy who knows where every skeleton is buried? Don't expect a training manual. Good luck running 18 years of institutional knowledge on enthusiasm and PowerPoint slides." Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where it gets interesting. I walked straight to my office, locked the door, and took a deep breath. Not because I was panicking, because I was prepared. You don't work aerospace operations for 18 years without building documentation systems. Not just the official procedures that look good during audits, but the real knowledge that keeps production running. See, there's a difference between what's written in the procedure manuals and what actually works. The manual says to lubricate the main bearing on line 2 every 200 hours. But I knew from experience that bearings start showing wear symptoms at 180 hours if the ambient temperature runs above 78 degrees, which it does every summer when our HVAC system struggles to keep up in the Phoenix heat. The manual doesn't mention that Gerald Williams from Phoenix Steel Supply will expedite emergency orders if you call him directly instead of going through their customer service system. Or that our Boeing quality inspector, Patricia Martinez, prefers dimensional reports formatted in metric, even though Boeing's official specs are in inches. That's the knowledge you can't transfer in a handoff meeting. It lives in relationships built over years, in understanding the quirks of machinery that has personality, in knowing which suppliers will actually deliver on their promises and which ones are just good at making excuses. The kind of institutional knowledge that takes decades to build and seconds to lose when you hand the keys to someone who thinks experience is just another word for outdated. 5 minutes later, my computer chimed with an HR message. Subject, transition support process. Body, hi Tom. Thank you for your years of service. Attached is the knowledge transfer checklist. Please ensure all processes are documented for Casey and Jordan by end of week. We appreciate your cooperation during this transition. Best regards, HR team. I stared at that smiley face emoji in what was essentially my termination notice. The audacity was almost impressive. They wanted me to document 18 years of aerospace expertise in a week-long handoff to two guys whose greatest operational experience was probably troubleshooting their home Wi-Fi networks. I clicked reply and typed slowly. Thank you. Please direct all transition requests through legal counsel. My attorney will respond appropriately. Hit send. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Succession Documentation. Because here's something about aerospace companies like Titan. They survive on knowledge continuity. And continuity lives in relationships, in understanding tolerances, in knowing which supplier will actually deliver on time and which one will leave you hanging when you need them most. The knowledge you don't transfer in a coffee chat with two guys whose greatest professional achievement was probably moderating some college business club. By 4:00 p.m., Casey had already locked himself out of the quality management system. By 4:30, he'd requested admin access to databases that didn't use standard passwords. At 4:45, Jordan sent an email asking where we kept the digital files for supplier performance metrics. I sat in my office finishing my coffee, watching 18 years of institutional knowledge disappear like smoke in a windstorm. Richard never followed up. No call, no email, not even a text message that told me everything I needed to know. They thought I'd fight, plead, or try to prove my value. They didn't understand that I'd already taken everything valuable with me. Now here's what Casey didn't know about our quality management system. It wasn't just software with login credentials. It was built around relationships and processes that took years to establish. When supplier A shipped material that was slightly out of spec, the system didn't automatically know that their metallurgy was actually superior, and we could accept it with a deviation approval. When Machine 8 started showing dimensional drift, the system couldn't tell you that the real issue was tool wear that happens predictably every 2,800 parts, not the 3,000 parts the manufacturer recommended. Casey showed up Wednesday morning wearing a polo shirt that said "Innovate or Die" across the chest, which I found ironically appropriate. He bounced into the production floor like he was launching a startup, carrying an energy drink and calling an all-hands meeting that nobody had time for. You could smell the business school confidence on him, like cologne mixed with complete ignorance of how aerospace manufacturing actually works. First order of business, implementing lean digital workflows for production scheduling. Now, production scheduling in precision aerospace isn't something you optimize with an app you found online. It's a complex balance of machine capacity, material availability, customer priorities, and equipment maintenance windows built on relationships with 23 different suppliers, and 18 years of understanding which promises you can trust and which ones are just wishful thinking. Casey, blessed with the confidence that only comes from never being catastrophically wrong about something important, decided to migrate our entire scheduling system to a cloud-based platform he'd discovered during his research phase. By 10:30 a.m., he'd uploaded our production data to a system that immediately flagged half our processes as non-standard. By 11:15, the software had automatically reordered our priorities based on optimization algorithms. By noon, we had 3 production lines sitting idle because the new system had scheduled materials that wouldn't arrive until next Tuesday. Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where you really start to see the difference between running an aerospace operation and running a spreadsheet. Antonio Ramirez, our floor supervisor with 23 years at Titan, walked up to Casey and said, "Kid, this new system just shut down line 2 because it thinks we're out of titanium bar stock. We've got 2,000 pounds sitting right there." He pointed to a clearly marked inventory rack about 30 feet away. Casey smiled like Antonio was a child who didn't understand technology. "The system is learning our processes. There might be some initial calibration issues, but the AI will optimize everything once it has enough data." Antonio looked at me through the office window. I shrugged. Not my circus anymore. But I knew what Antonio was thinking because I'd been thinking the same thing for 18 years. You can't run a factory with algorithms that don't understand the difference between having material in inventory and having the right material in the right place at the right time with the proper certifications. By Thursday, things got interesting in the way that makes insurance companies nervous. The aerospace client portal started flagging our shipments as non-compliant. Turns out Casey had modified our quality documentation format to match his new digital system, but he'd accidentally removed the aerospace industry specification codes that Boeing required for traceability. Simple mistake, except it meant $340,000 worth of precision 737-800 wing brackets were sitting in legal limbo because the paperwork didn't match industry standards that had been in place since before Casey was born. Then Jordan decided to streamline our supplier relationships. He sent emails to 23 vendors announcing that Titan was optimizing their partnership portfolio and requesting updated pricing for a competitive bidding process. What Jordan didn't know was that 8 of those suppliers had exclusive agreements based on volume commitments I'd negotiated over years of relationship building. Another 6 were single-source providers for specialized materials that couldn't be easily replaced without months of qualification testing. Within 48 hours, I was getting phone calls at home. "Tom, what's going on over there? Some kid named Jordan is asking us to rebid contracts that are locked until next year." That was Gerald Williams from Phoenix Steel Supply, a supplier relationship I'd built over 12 years of mutual respect and understanding. "Is this some kind of internal politics thing, or are you guys actually shopping around?" I told Gerald the truth. "I'm not there anymore. That's Casey Hartwell and Jordan Hartwell, the owner's son and nephew. They're implementing their vision for the company." Gerald was quiet for a moment. "Their vision doesn't include honoring existing agreements?" "Apparently not." "Well, that's unfortunate. We've had a good run, Tom. If you land somewhere else that needs reliable steel supply, give me a call." By Friday morning, the word hiccup had been used in 6 emails, 3 meetings, and 1 internal memo from Casey titled Transition, Clarity, and Optimism. I'd seen toddlers throw less delusional tantrums at Chuck E. Cheese. Friday morning came like a court summons. The FAA audit team arrived for our annual AS9100 certification review, the one that keeps us qualified to supply aerospace clients. Casey greeted them wearing a t-shirt that said, "Disruption is innovation," and immediately started explaining how they were modernizing legacy compliance frameworks. The lead auditor, Patricia Hayes, a woman who'd been doing FAA reviews since before Casey was born, listened politely and then asked to see our current quality management documentation. Casey handed her a tablet with his new digital system pulled up, grinning like he'd just solved world hunger with a smartphone app. Patricia scrolled through it for about 3 minutes, then looked up with the expression of someone who'd just been handed a crayon drawing when she asked for architectural blueprints. "Mr. Hartwell, this appears to be missing several required documentation elements. Where are your supplier qualification records?" "They're all digitized now," Casey said confidently. "Much more efficient than paper files. I need to see the actual qualification audits, material certifications, and traceability documentation for ITAR compliance." Casey's confidence flickered like a fluorescent light about to burn out. Jordan handles that part of the system. Jordan looked up from his phone with the expression of someone who just realized he was supposed to be paying attention. It's all in the cloud database. I can pull up any supplier information you need. Patricia waited. Jordan typed on his tablet, typed some more. His expression gradually changed from confident to concerned to the kind of panic you see when someone realizes they've just driven into a lake. The system seems to be loading slowly today. What Jordan didn't know was that our supplier qualification records weren't just data points in a spreadsheet. They were physical certifications, signed agreements, test results, and relationship histories that I'd maintained in a filing system that was both digital and physical. The kind of backup documentation that keeps you compliant when systems fail and auditors start asking uncomfortable questions. Patricia made notes in her audit folder with the methodical precision of someone documenting a train wreck. I'll need to see those records before we can complete the certification review. That's when Casey realized he might have a problem bigger than his startup fantasies could handle. He pulled out his phone and called me 6 times in a row. I didn't answer. The 7th time, he left a voicemail that I still have saved. Tom, hey, it's Casey. We're having some technical difficulties with the documentation system. Could you swing by and help us locate a few files? It would really help the team out. I listened to the message, smiled, and deleted it. Now, here's what you need to understand about AS9100 certifications in aerospace manufacturing. They're not suggestions or guidelines. They're requirements that determine whether you can sell to major aerospace companies. Without AS9100 certification, Titan couldn't supply Boeing, Lockheed Martin, or any other serious manufacturer. It's like trying to drive without a license. You might get away with it for a while, but eventually someone's going to ask to see your papers. Meanwhile, something interesting was happening across town. Linda Torres, the COO of Skyline Aerospace, a smaller but growing manufacturing company, had been watching Titan's situation develop through industry channels. She reached out to me the previous Friday with a proposition that made a lot more sense than anything I'd heard from Casey and Jordan. Tom, we've been following your work for years. Quality management systems, supplier relationships, safety protocols. We're looking for someone to head up our operations expansion. Interested in a conversation? I was very interested. Skyline Aerospace was everything Titan could have been with proper leadership. Growing, stable, focused on building expertise rather than disrupting it for the sake of disruption. They offered me VP of Operations with equity participation and complete authority over process development. At 49, this was exactly the kind of opportunity that could set up my next 15 years perfectly. I started Monday. No drama, no announcements, just moved from one company that didn't value institutional knowledge to one that did. My first week, I helped them land a contract with a major defense contractor, leveraging supplier relationships that Casey and Jordan had just blown up. Back at Titan, the AS9100 audit results came in like a death certificate, certification suspended pending, documentation compliance, 6 months to remediate or lose aerospace qualification entirely. The Boeing contract was placed under review. 3 suppliers had terminated their agreements, citing breach of terms that Jordan didn't even know existed. Casey sent me one last email. Subject, urgent, company crisis. Body, Tom, we really need your help. Things have gotten complicated and we could use your expertise to stabilize the situation. Whatever it takes to get you back, we're open to discussing it. I forwarded it to my new boss at Skyline Aerospace with a note. This is why institutional knowledge matters and why you hire people for their expertise, not their age. She wrote back, glad we got you when we did. Your supplier network is going to be invaluable for our expansion. 6 weeks later, I heard through industry contacts that Titan had hired a consulting firm to rebuild their quality management system. Cost, $280,000. Timeline, 8 months. Success probability uncertain since they'd lost their aerospace certification and 2 major suppliers. Richard called me one more time. I answered. Tom, I owe you an apology. We made some mistakes in how we handled your transition. Richard, you didn't handle my transition. You replaced me with your son and nephew and hoped for the best. What would it take to get you to come back? Consulting arrangement, temporary basis, whatever you need. I looked out the window of my new office at Skyline Aerospace where the production floor was humming efficiently and our quality metrics were trending upward. Richard, I'm not coming back. I'm building something better. That was 4 months ago. Titan finally regained their AS9100 certification last month, but they lost the Boeing contract and laid off 60 people. Skyline Aerospace just landed a new defense contract and we're hiring 25 more production workers. The moral isn't that young people can't learn aerospace manufacturing. It's that experience matters, relationships matter, and when you discard institutional knowledge for buzzwords and family connections, you get exactly what you deserve.